Do you like your army?
I look forward to seeing them in action.
They'll do their job well. I guarantee that.
Thank you for your time, Jango.
Always a pleasure to meet a Jedi. This is only one Kenobi. Only one.
Today I'd like to talk to you about Jango Fett. I wanted to talk to you about Jango Fett. I did a video not long ago on Boba Fett, and I mentioned the voices that we used, and I did say that I did think that the original voice for Boba Fett was my favourite in Empire Strikes Back. And I did say also that I love the character of Jango Fett, which I do. I love Jango Fett. I thought it was a great idea. I loved Temuera Morrison. I thought he was great in that role, quite sinister. And that scene that I've just impersonated the end of is quite sinister. I love it. And even on the audio commentary, George Lucas says, he says, Obi-Wan knows this full well, this is the guy he's looking for. And it's just so awkward, isn't it? And they stood there and it's, anyway. So, Jango Fett. And I thought to myself, well, we've had a nice Jango Fett in the Vintage Collection, and here he is. Unfortunately, I've never ever had one of these to open for myself and have one loose. I've just passed an opportunity to have one loose because I had a duplicate one of these punched, which I decided to sell, and I made a tiny profit, and I needed the money to buy other figures. But anyway, I don't have this one loose, and I can't say what it's like. I do have this loose though. Let me show you. But I don't believe this is a Vintage Collection one. I think the Vintage Collection one was a repack of this one, but this one might have come from the Legacy Collection. I only know that from a flyguy.net video I've seen where he compared two figures together, and he actually had his second figure, or the Legacy one, in that pose, which I think you could probably do with that figure. Alas, when I bought this figure, it was from a fellow on eBay who was selling loads of Vintage Collection figures loose, and I was kind of hoping that this was going to be the Vintage Collection one. It might be, but it doesn't have the pouch. It didn't come with a pouch. But anyway, so there you go. That was pretty much it for the Vintage Collection. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that is the definitive Jango Fett because it was a Vintage Collection one, and why would we have another one? Well, there's two reasons why we could have another Jango Fett. Number one is for a brand new figure, a figure that could be classed as definitive. Now, let me show you this figure. This one was a 5 points of articulation figure, and as Sith Lord 229 pointed out, because I first watched his video when it came out and I had to buy one. I missed an opportunity to buy one in the shops, and then I had to get this one on eBay, probably slightly cheaper than it would have been in the shops. But I do agree with Sith Lord 229, who is a legend on, I was going to say eBay, a legend on YouTube. He is the living archive of all figures and he knows his stuff, but that is an amazing figure, albeit it's 5 points of articulation, so you can't do much with it other than this. And legs. But anyway, it's brilliant. Look at it. That's just so chunky. I mean, Jango Fett was always slightly chunkier than Boba, because Boba slimmed down. Maybe Boba learnt from his father's armour and decided to have just pads, and then he had clothing, didn't he? But this fella's just got armour. But that is just how I remember him looking when he was suited up in the film. It's a great helmet, that, by the way. You can't remove it. You can't do anything with it, really. You can't even move the rangefinder down, but it just looks good as a statue, that. So, yeah, as I remember him looking on the kind of publicity posters as well for Jango Fett. So that's one reason why we could get another figure back. And the second reason is an alternative card back. Now, that is a figure, I'd say that's kind of CGI'd, I don't know, but it's definitely from the fight on Kamino on the landing pad in the rain. But in terms of doing more than one card back, this is where the Vintage Collection could go on forever. They could just do so many alternatives, which is great. It's what we want. Here's an example of an alternative. This was a Vintage Collection figure. It's a card back from the 80s, but re-released with a modern figure inside. And then, hey presto, they also gave you this in the Vintage Collection. They gave you another Han on a vintage card, but this was never seen before. This was first seen in 2010. And here's another example. Sand Trooper. I was looking at my Sand Troopers the other day and I was thinking, wow, here's another example of two releases of the same character, albeit they've got different pauldrons. This is a white pauldron, this is orange. But these were two figures that were released, and they were both not from the 80s, if you know what I mean. These are both modern figures, because this was never released before, a Sand Trooper. So it just goes to show you can get two alternatives. By the way, on the separate subject of the Sand Troopers, that's my favourite of the two, because the card back is, that's definitely an image from New Hope. Someone was in the pilot. the tracks go off in this direction, and this one is one of the CGI ones from the special edition. So that's, you'd say that that's a 97, 77, but they both were released in the 2000s. 2010 for that one and 2012 for this one. So anyway, that's what I'm trying to say. I could go on forever with these videos. That's just another idea I've had about getting Jango Fett back out there, and can we improve him? I think they could improve him, definitely. Speaking of Jango, I'm not much of a 6-inch collection, but I do own this. In the room next door where I have my Millennium Falcon, I have a select choice of 6-inch figures I've decided to buy. I don't really want to go too far with collecting these because, number one, I don't really have the space, and number two, it's a financial thing as well, and I just think to myself, if I start with buying 1, 2, 3, I'll buy 10, 20, 30, 40, and I don't want two separate, I don't want like a load of 6-inch and a load of 3 3/4 inch. I'd like to stay where it's traditional, because I know the quality of 3 3/4 inch can be exceptionally good. Not just that one, but all sorts of figures that are in the vintage collection. We've seen quality before, we could see it again, bring it back in 2018, Hasbro. So there you go, that's my thoughts. I'd love to see the return of Jango Fett. Would you? And also, let me know your thoughts in the comment box. This has been Jango Fett. I mean, it's been Only One Kenobi. Only one, out.